What would you do if you found 20 helpless puppies abandoned in a soaking wet box on a rainy road? No mother in sight, no warmth to keep them alive. Jack and Margaret, an elderly couple, stumbled upon this heartbreaking scene. But why were these puppies left alone? Who could be so cruel? And most importantly, could these tiny lives ever find hope again? The morning was cloaked in a grey haze as rain drizzled steadily over the countryside. Jack adjusted his grip on the steering wheel of their Ford Crown Victoria station wagon, his eyes focused on the narrow, winding road ahead. Beside him, Margaret peered out through the fogged window, her hands clasped tightly around her small floral umbrella resting on her lap. The sound of the rain tapping against the car roof provided a rhythmic backdrop to the otherwise quiet drive. "Jack, slow down," Margaret said suddenly, her voice cutting through the steady hum of the engine. Jack furrowed his brow, easing his foot off the gas pedal. "What is it?" he asked, glancing at his wife before following her gaze. On the side of the road, partially hidden by overgrown grass, sat a weathered cardboard box, its edges sagging under the weight of the rain. "There," Margaret pointed. "That box. It doesn't belong there." Jack pulled the car to the shoulder and killed the engine. The rain intensified as they both stepped out, each armed with an umbrella. The cold droplets seeped through their clothes almost immediately, but neither paid it any mind. They approached the box cautiously, the muddy ground squelching beneath their feet. As they drew nearer, a faint sound reached Margaret's ears, tiny, high-pitched whimpers barely audible over the rain. Her breath hitched. "Jack, do you hear that?" Jack nodded, his jaw tightening as he knelt beside the box. He hesitated for a moment before flipping the soggy lid open. Both gasped at what they saw. Inside the box were 20 Labrador Retriever puppies, their pale yellow fur drenched and clinging to their tiny bodies. They huddled together, shivering violently, their wide, frightened eyes glinting in the dim light. Margaret clutched her chest, overcome by the pitiful sight. "Dear God," she whispered, "who could do such a thing?" Jack's hands hovered above the puppies as if unsure where to start. "There's no mother," he muttered, scanning the area for any sign of an adult dog. The roadside stretched into a misty void, offering no answers. Margaret knelt beside him, her umbrella forgotten as rain poured down her back. "We can't leave them here, Jack. They'll never survive in this cold." Her voice cracked with urgency, and tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. Jack nodded firmly, his decision made. "You're right. Let's get them into the car." One by one, they carefully lifted the puppies out of the box. Margaret cradled each trembling body, murmuring softly to calm their cries, while Jack tucked them gently into a blanket he retrieved from the trunk. The car's interior quickly filled with the soft whimpers of the puppies and the musty smell of wet fur. By the time the last puppy was safely inside, Jack and Margaret were soaked to the bone. Jack closed the trunk with a decisive thud, his face set in a grim line as he climbed back into the driver's seat. Margaret settled beside him, her hands trembling as she adjusted the blanket over the puppies. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack started the car, the windshield wipers creaking as they fought against the rain. "First, we get them home. Then we figure out how to help them." The drive back was tense. Margaret couldn't take her eyes off the tiny creatures huddled together in the back. Their frailty tugged at her heartstrings, and she couldn't help but wonder about the circumstances that had led to their abandonment. "Do you think someone just dumped them?" she asked, breaking the silence. Jack's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "It seems that way. Whoever did this didn't care if they lived or died." Margaret shook her head in disbelief. "How could anyone be so cruel? They're just babies." Jack didn't reply, his focus fixed on the road. But Margaret could see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. It was rare for Jack to show much emotion, but this situation seemed to have struck a nerve. When they finally pulled into their driveway, The rain had lessened to a soft drizzle. Their modest countryside home, with its peeling white paint and a porch swing that creaked in the wind, stood like a sanctuary amidst the gloom. Jack parked the car close to the front door and turned to Margaret. "Let's get them inside quickly," he said, grabbing the blanket-wrapped puppies. Margaret opened the door, clearing a space in the living room for their unexpected guests. She laid down another blanket on the floor, creating a makeshift bed, as Jack gently transferred the puppies one by one. The little ones stirred, their tiny tails twitching as they began to warm up. Margaret crouched beside them, her fingers brushing over their damp fur. "They're so cold," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "We'll need to dry them off and get them something to eat." Jack nodded, already heading towards the kitchen. "I'll find some towels and see if we have any milk left." As Margaret worked to dry the puppies, she couldn't help but notice their varying sizes and personalities. One particularly small pup snuggled closer to her hand, letting out a soft whimper. Another, slightly larger, tried to stand but wobbled unsteadily before collapsing back into the blanket. "They're fighters," she said softly, her lips curving into a faint smile despite the tears in her eyes. Jack returned with a stack of towels and a bowl of warmed milk. "We'll have to feed them with a dropper for now," he said, handing Margaret one of the droppers they kept for emergencies. They worked in tandem, drying each puppy and feeding them a few drops of milk at a time. The room was filled with the soft sounds of tiny slurps and contented sighs as the puppies began to settle down. Margaret glanced at Jack, her heart swelling with gratitude for his calm efficiency. "You're a good man, Jack," she said quietly. Jack paused, looking at her with a mixture of exhaustion and affection. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." When the last puppy was fed and tucked into the blanket, Margaret sat back with a deep sigh. "We need a plan," she said. "There's no way we can keep all of them." Jack nodded, his gaze resting on the sleeping puppies. "We'll figure it out tomorrow. Right now, they just need to rest. And so do we." As the rain continued to patter against the windows, Jack and Margaret sat together on the floor, watching over the tiny lives they had rescued. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, they felt a quiet sense of purpose. These 20 puppies had been given a second chance, and Jack and Margaret were determined to see them through. The morning sun peeked through heavy clouds, casting a faint light over Jack and Margaret's living room. 20 tiny puppies huddled together on a large blanket spread out on the floor, their soft breaths rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Despite their fragile state, their little tails twitched as if dreaming of warmth and safety. Margaret stood near the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Her eyes lingered on the puppies, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "Jack," she said, her voice tinged with worry, "we can't take care of all of them. It's too much for just the two of us." Jack, sitting in his favorite armchair, nodded in agreement. "You're right, but what choice do we have?" Margaret turned to face him, determination lighting her expression. "Alice, she's always talking about how the internet can connect people. Maybe she can help us." Jack raised an eyebrow, skeptical but willing. "It's worth a shot. I'll go fetch her." Within the hour, Alice, their neighbour from down the lane, arrived at their doorstep, her raincoat folded over her arm and a camera slung around her neck. In her late 30s, Alice had a knack for technology and a heart for animals. She knelt beside the puppies, her eyes widening with compassion. "Oh, Margaret," Alice murmured, gently stroking one of the tiny heads. "Who could abandon such innocent creatures?" "That's the question we've been asking ourselves," Jack replied, standing nearby. "We're hoping you can help us. We need to find homes for them, and quickly." Alice nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "I'll take some photos and write a post about their story. People love a good rescue story, and I'm sure there are animal lovers out there who would be eager to help." Margaret handed Alice a towel to dry one of the puppies before snapping a picture. "Thank you, Alice. We didn't know where to start." With the puppies cleaned up and calmed, Alice began arranging them on the blanket, capturing their most endearing expressions. She clicked her camera several times, cooing softly to encourage the shy ones to peek out. After a short session, she had a collection of heartwarming photos ready. That evening, Alice sat with Jack and Margaret at the kitchen table, her laptop glowing softly in the dimly lit room. Together they crafted a heartfelt post. 20 Labrador Retriever puppies were found abandoned in the cold rain, with no mother in sight. These little ones need loving homes and immediate care. Can you help? Any donations of food, toys, or supplies are also deeply appreciated. Please contact us if you can provide support or a forever home for one of these puppies. Accompanied by the adorable photos, the post was uploaded to several local community pages and animal rescue groups. Within minutes, likes and comments began to flood in. "Look at this," Alice said, tilting the laptop toward Jack and Margaret. "People are already sharing it." Margaret's eyes filled with tears of relief as she read some of the comments. "How can I help? I'd love to adopt one. Bless you for saving them." The next morning, the doorbell rang. A local woman arrived with bags of dog food and a basket of toys. "I saw the post," she said, handing the supplies to Jack. "I can't adopt right now, but I hope this helps." Throughout the day, more neighbors and even strangers stopped by, bringing food, bedding, and donations. A retired couple offered to foster 2 of the puppies until permanent homes could be found. The once quiet countryside home buzzed with activity and hope. That afternoon, as Jack and Margaret prepared the puppies for another round of feeding, a knock sounded at the door. Margaret opened it to find a young man standing on the porch, a medical bag in hand. "Hi, I'm Ryan," he said with a warm smile. "I'm a veterinarian. I saw your post online and thought I'd come by to check on the puppies." Ryan knelt beside the blanket, examining each puppy with gentle precision. He checked their eyes, ears, and paws, murmuring words of reassurance as he worked. The puppies responded well to his touch, some even wagging their tails weakly. "They're in better shape than I expected," Ryan said after completing his assessment. "A few are underweight, and 1 or 2 have mild respiratory issues, but nothing serious. With proper food, warmth, and care, they'll recover fully." Margaret let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Ryan. That's such a relief to hear." Ryan smiled. "You've done an incredible job so far. Most people wouldn't have gone to such lengths. If you need anything, medicine, advice, whatever, just let me know." Jack extended his hand, shaking Ryan's firmly. "We appreciate that, son. It means a lot." After Ryan left, Margaret and Jack sat in the living room, watching the puppies play with their new toys. The sound of tiny paws pattering on the wooden floor and the occasional squeak of a chew toy filled the air. Margaret looked at Jack, her face softening. "Feels like we're not alone in this anymore." Jack nodded, his eyes on the puppies. "There's still a long way to go, but we're making progress. These little ones have a chance now." As the rain began to fall again outside, the couple shared a quiet moment of gratitude. The world had seemed so cold and indifferent when they first found the box on the roadside. But now, thanks to the kindness of their community, hope was beginning to bloom. With renewed determination, Jack and Margaret resolved to see their mission through. The 20 tiny lives they had saved deserved nothing less than a future filled with love and security. The week passed in a blur of care and commotion. The once frail and shivering Labrador Retriever puppies had transformed into a lively bunch, their pale yellow fur now fluffy and soft, their eyes bright with newfound energy. The living room of Jack and Margaret's cozy countryside home was no longer a quiet retreat, but a lively haven filled with the pitter-patter of tiny paws and the playful yips of 20 puppies. Margaret stood by the doorway, watching the little ones tumble over each other in a game of tug-of-war with a squeaky toy. She chuckled, her heart full at the sight of their exuberance. "They've come so far in just a week," she said softly. Jack, sitting in his armchair with a puppy nestled in his lap, nodded. You'd never know they were the same pups we found in that soggy box. They're fighters, every single one of them." Margaret smiled, but a hint of worry lingered in her eyes. Now comes the hard part, finding them all good homes. The next morning, the first family arrived. A young couple from a neighboring town stepped out of their car, holding hands and beaming with excitement. They had seen the post online and immediately fallen in love with the idea of adopting a puppy. Margaret welcomed them warmly. Come in, they're just over here," she said, leading them into the living room. The puppies, sensing the presence of new people, bounded toward them with wagging tails and curious noses. The young couple knelt on the floor, laughing as the puppies climbed over their laps. "This one," the woman said, gently picking up a small puppy with soulful eyes. "He's perfect." Margaret's heart swelled with both joy and a touch of sadness. "He's a sweetheart," she said. "I know he'll be happy with you." Throughout the day, families trickled in, each bringing their own unique energy and enthusiasm. A single mother with 2 young children chose a playful pair of siblings, their giggles filling the room as the puppies licked their faces. An older couple, recently retired, decided on a calm, gentle pup who immediately snuggled into their arms. Margaret and Jack stood by, watching each interaction with pride and a twinge of melancholy. The puppies had become like family in such a short time, and letting them go was bittersweet. Still, seeing the joy they brought to others was a comfort. As the afternoon wore on, a family of 4 arrived, a husband, wife, and their 2 young children. The kids' laughter echoed through the house as they played with the puppies, but one particular pup stole the show. A sprightly little one with boundless energy hopped from one lap to another, his tail wagging furiously as he licked everyone's hands and faces. "He's like a little popcorn kernel bouncing around," the daughter exclaimed, clapping her hands in delight. Margaret laughed. "Popcorn. What a perfect name." The family agreed, and soon the energetic puppy officially became Popcorn. As they prepared to leave, Margaret crouched down to give Popcorn one last pat. "You're going to have a wonderful life, little one," she whispered. By the end of the day, most of the puppies had found their new families. The once bustling living room now felt quieter, though a few pups still remained, curled up together on their blanket. Margaret sank into the couch, her heart heavy yet full. Jack sat beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Margaret," he said. "We gave them a chance, and now they have homes where they'll be loved." Margaret nodded, her eyes misty. "It's just, they've brought so much light into this house. It's hard to let them go." Jack gave her a small smile. "They've left their paw prints on our hearts. And thanks to you, they've left here knowing what love feels like." As night fell, Margaret and Jack sat together, reflecting on the day's events. Their hearts ached for the goodbyes, but swelled with hope for the futures of the puppies they had saved. They knew their home would be quieter now, but the memories of this extraordinary journey would stay with them forever. And somewhere out there, Popcorn was likely hopping and bouncing his way into his new family's hearts, just as he had done in theirs. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the countryside as the day began to wind down. Jack and Margaret sat on their front porch, sipping tea and watching the remaining puppies frolic in the yard. The once bustling living room was now quieter, with just a handful of the little Labrador retrievers still waiting to find their forever homes. As the couple enjoyed the serene moment, a car pulled up into the driveway. It was an old pickup truck, its dark green paint scuffed but well maintained. From it stepped a tall, elderly man with a weathered face and kind eyes. He wore a flannel shirt tucked into his jeans, and a wide-brimmed hat shielded him from the fading sunlight. Jack and Margaret exchanged a curious glance as the man approached. "Good evening," he called out, his voice deep but gentle. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Jack replied, standing to greet him. "I'm Jack, and this is my wife, Margaret." The man tipped his hat respectfully. "Henry's the name. I heard about your puppies from a friend and thought I'd come by to see them. Henry knelt in the yard, extending a hand toward the puppies. They approached him cautiously at first, sniffing his outstretched fingers before wagging their tails and crowding around him. He chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to resonate with the pups. "They're beautiful," Henry said, his eyes softening as he looked at the playful bunch. "I used to raise Labrador retrievers on my farm. Haven't had the heart to keep any since my wife passed a couple of years ago." Margaret's hand instinctively went to her chest. "I'm so sorry to hear that," she said, her voice filled with empathy. Henry nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. "She loved them, you know, said they brought life to the farm. After she was gone, the house just felt empty." Jack and Margaret exchanged a glance, their hearts aching for the man who stood before them. Henry continued, his voice steadier now. "I've been thinking about getting dogs again, but I didn't want just one. Dogs need friends. They grow better together, just like I did when I was young, so I'd like to take 5. Margaret blinked in surprise. 5? Are you sure, Henry? That's quite a lot." Henry smiled, his face creasing with warmth. "I've got the space and the time. The farm isn't as busy as it used to be, but it's still a good place for them to run around, and I could use the company." Jack folded his arms, studying the man thoughtfully. "It's a big responsibility. They're going to need a lot of care and attention." "Don't worry," Henry replied, his tone earnest. "I've raised pups before. I know what it takes. And honestly," he added with a quiet chuckle, "I think they'll do more for me than I'll ever do for them." Margaret's eyes shimmered with tears as she stepped closer. "It sounds like they'd be going to a wonderful home." Henry spent the next hour getting to know the puppies. He crouched low, letting them climb over him as he observed their personalities. Eventually, he settled on 5 that seemed to bond with him naturally, a mix of playful and calm pups, each with their own unique quirks. "This little guy," Henry said, holding up a curious pup with floppy ears and an adventurous spirit, "reminds me of one we had years ago. Name was Rusty." Margaret knelt beside him, stroking the pup's soft fur. "Have you thought about names for them?" Henry smiled. "Not yet, but I will. Names come with time, once you get to know them." As Henry prepared to leave, Jack and Margaret helped load the puppies into the back seat of his truck, carefully laying out a blanket for them to rest on. The pups seemed content, wagging their tails and snuggling into their new surroundings. Jack placed a firm hand on Henry's shoulder. "Take good care of them, Henry. They've already been through so much." Henry met Jack's gaze with a steady nod. "You have my word. They'll be loved like family." Margaret leaned in for a gentle hug. "Thank you for giving them a home. I hope they bring as much joy to your life as they have to ours." Henry's voice softened. "They already have." As Henry's truck disappeared down the dirt road, the house felt a little emptier. Margaret wiped a tear from her cheek, her emotions a mix of happiness and sadness. "They'll be happy with him," Jack said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You can tell he's the right kind of person." Margaret nodded. "He's not just giving them a home, they're giving him something too, hope." As the sun set over the horizon, Jack and Margaret sat together on the porch, reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. Their journey with the puppies had brought new people, stories, and meaning into their lives. And for Henry, the bond with his 5 new companions promised to heal old wounds and brighten his days ahead. The sound of crickets filled the evening air as Margaret whispered, "It feels like the start of something beautiful, doesn't it?" Jack smiled. "It sure does." The days following the adoption of the puppies were quieter, but no less eventful. Jack and Margaret's home, once bustling with 20 energetic Labrador retriever puppies, now echoed with the stillness of reflection. Though their house was empty of wagging tails and tiny paws, their hearts were full, and their story was far from over. Margaret sat at the kitchen table one morning, flipping through her laptop with Alice beside her. The younger woman had stopped by to share the latest updates about the post that had brought the puppies into the lives of so many. "It's incredible, Margaret," Alice said, her voice tinged with awe. "The post has been shared hundreds of times. People from all over are reaching out. Some want to help, others just want to thank you and Jack for what you've done." Margaret leaned closer, her eyes scanning the comments. Messages poured in from strangers across the region. "You're an inspiration. Thank you for reminding us that kindness still exists. Your story has touched my heart." Her hand covered her mouth, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. "I never thought something like this would happen," she murmured. "All we did was pick up a box by the road." Alice smiled. "That's the thing about kindness. It has a way of spreading further than you'd ever expect." Later that afternoon, the phone rang. Jack picked it up, his deep voice greeting the caller. As he listened, his brows furrowed in curiosity and then lifted in surprise. "Well, I'll be," he said, chuckling as he set the receiver down. "Margaret, you won't believe this." Margaret looked up from her book. "What is it?" "That was a group from the local animal rescue center. They heard about the puppies and want to work with us. They said if we ever come across another situation like this, they'll provide support, supplies, volunteers, the works." Margaret's eyes widened. "You're joking." "Not at all," Jack said, shaking his head with a grin. "They even want to feature us in their newsletter as an example of community action." Margaret sat back, stunned. "I never imagined we'd be doing something like this, Jack. At our age—" Jack smiled, his weathered face warm with pride. "Neither did I. But sometimes it only takes one small decision to change an entire story." In the weeks that followed, Jack and Margaret found themselves at the center of a movement they never expected to lead. Their story, first shared online, continued to inspire acts of kindness throughout the community. People began reaching out to their local shelters, offering donations, fostering animals, and even starting their own rescue efforts. A local newspaper ran an article titled "The Puppy Couple Who Changed Everything," featuring Jack and Margaret standing proudly on their porch, the Ford Crown Victoria in the background. In the photo, Margaret held a framed picture of the puppies, a reminder of the journey that had changed their lives. Strangers would stop them in town to shake their hands or offer words of encouragement. Some even shared how the story had motivated them to adopt pets or help animals in need. One crisp autumn evening, Jack and Margaret sat together on their porch swing, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. Margaret wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, her gaze distant but serene. "Jack," she said softly, "I still think about them sometimes, where they are now if they're happy." "They're happy," Jack replied firmly. "We made sure they went to good homes, and from what I've heard, Popcorn's still bouncing around like crazy." Margaret chuckled, her laughter warm against the cool night. "I hope he's giving his family as much joy as he gave us." She turned to Jack, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I never thought we'd be able to make such a difference at this stage of our lives. It's strange, isn't it? How one small act can grow into something so big." Jack nodded, his hand resting on hers. "It's not strange, Margaret. It's just how life works. Sometimes the smallest decisions, like stopping to check a box on the side of the road, can change everything." And so, as Jack and Margaret looked out at the quiet night, their hearts were filled with peace. Though their home was silent now, the memories of the puppies and the love they had shared would always remain. Margaret turned to Jack, her voice soft but full of conviction. "Do you think God had a hand in this, Jack, bringing those little lives to us?" Jack smiled, his weathered face reflecting the warmth of her words. "I believe he did, Margaret, and I believe he's watching over those puppies now, blessing them with the love they've found." Their journey reminded them, and all of us, that no matter our age, no matter our circumstances, it's never too late to make a difference. With faith in God's plan and a heart open to kindness, even the smallest acts can create miracles. Because in the end, what truly matters is the love we leave behind and the lives we touch along the way. And as the stars twinkled above, Jack and Margaret whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for the blessings they'd received and for the chance to be a blessing to others.